Well, good morning. It is March, and that means that it's Women's History Month. And just this last week was the International Women's Day. And it's something that has been in the works since about 1977. Actually, it goes back a long way before that. Some of the origins go back to a Russian garment workers' strike where the women in 1909 were striking for better wages and working conditions, and they sparked a movement that spread to the United States, to other countries in Europe. Copenhagen had one just a few years later, and the movement was growing up along the same time as the women's suffrage movement, with women who were doing everything they could to advocate for the vote. And it was, there's a lot of history to be had here, and I encourage you to go out and look for it and read it. A lot of you have actually lived through it, and you've seen a lot of changes in your life. And so what I'd like to do with today's poetry program is offer you some poetry, old and new, that reflects on some of the significant changes that have taken place over the course of the last century or so. We are going to begin with three poems from Alice Duer Miller. She was born in 1874, and she died in 1942. She was from Staten Island, New York. Her work was influential for women's suffrage, and her satirical poetry collection, Are Women People, which was published in 1915, became a slogan for the suffrage movement. She died in New York City in 1942. We're going to begin with, like I said, three of her poems, and these have a satirical quality to them. Each one of them is a list, and so you'll kind of see things numbered here. Her first one is Why We Oppose Pockets for Women. 1, because pockets are not a natural right. 2, because the great majority of women do not want pockets. If they did, they would have them. 3, because whenever women have had pockets, they have not used them. 4, because women are required to carry enough things as it is, without the additional burden of pockets. 5, because it would make dissension between husband and wife as to whose pockets were to be filled. 6, because it would destroy man's chivalry toward woman if he did not have to carry all her things in his pockets. 7, because men are men and women are women, we must not fly in the face of nature. 8, because pockets have been used by men to carry tobacco, pipes, whiskey flasks, chewing gum, and compromising letters. We see no reason to suppose that women would use them more wisely. You can kind of hear the sarcasm there. And of course, it's not about pockets, it's about votes, right? Well, and about many other things as well. So our second one by Alice Duer Miller is also in this same vein. Why we oppose votes for men. 1, because man's place is the armory. 2, because no really manly man wants to settle any question otherwise than by fighting about it. 3, because if men should adopt peaceable methods, women will no longer look up to them. 4, because men will lose their charm if they step out of their natural sphere and interest themselves in other matters than feats of arms, uniforms, and drums. 5, because men are too emotional to vote. Their conduct at baseball games and political conventions shows this, while their innate tendency to appeal to force renders them particularly unfit for the task of government. I hope you don't have to reach very far to hear a lot of the criticisms of women that men had made in that time in order to argue that women shouldn't have the vote. Too emotional, they'll lose their charm, men will no longer want them or look up to them. The woman's place is, well. So our third one by Alice Duer Miller, kind of just to cap all of this off. She wrote many, many, many poems, and there are a lot of them that are just delightful and just a little bit either sarcastic or ironic, just like these. And they're actually a lot of fun to read. This one is called Our Own 12 Anti-Suffragist Reasons. 1. Because no woman will leave her domestic duties to vote. 2. Because no woman who may vote will attend to her domestic duties. 3. Because it will make dissension between husband and wife. 4. Because every woman will vote as her husband tells her to. 5. Because bad women will corrupt politics. 6. Because bad politics will corrupt women. 7. Because women have no power of organization. 8. Because women will form a solid party and outvote men. 9. Because men and women are so different that they must stick to different duties. 10. Because men and women are so much alike that men, with one vote each, can represent their own views and ours too. 11. Because women cannot use force. 12. Because the militants did use force. So there we are at the beginning of the last century, kind of setting the stage for the century to come. I'd like to turn next to Maya Angelou. I've shared this poem with you before, but there's something about it that I think bears repeating again and again in times like these when we are remembering what it really means to be equal, what it means for us to really respect one another for who we are, in the fullness of who we are. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise. bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. I'd like to turn to Mahogany Brown. She has written a poem that is going to get at the 19th Amendment. Of course, the 19th Amendment was passed by both houses of the legislative branch, the Senate and the House first, then the Senate in 1919. And it was ratified in the states by August of 1920, which, of course, meant that it took effect. And this 19th Amendment, of course, guaranteed the right to vote regardless of one's sex. Now, it didn't go so far as to open the vote freely to people of different races. That would take a long, long time more. But it was a milestone nevertheless. And Mahogany Brown writes this poem for her mother, and it's called The 19th Amendment and My Mama. I always took it for granted the right to vote, she said, and I knew what my mother meant. Her voice constricted tightly by the flu, a virus, and a 30-year relationship with Newport 100s. I ain't no chain smoker. She attempts to silence my concern. Only a pack a week. That's good, you know. My mother survived a husband she didn't want, and an addiction that loved her more than any human needs. I sit to write a poem about the 100-year anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and my first thought returns to the womb and those abortions I did not want at first. But alas, the thirst of an almost anything is a gorge always looking to be, until the body is filled with more fibroids than possibilities. On the 19th hour of the 4th day in a new decade, I will wake restless from some nightmare about a bomb and a man with no backbone on a golf course who clicks closed his Motorola phone like an exclamation point against his misogynistic stance. He swings the golf club with each chant. Women let me grab. Women like me. Women vote until I say they don't. In my nightmare, he is an ineffective agent. In the clear of day, he is just the same. Every day he breathes is a threat to this country's marrow for Ida and Susan and Lucretia and Elizabeth Cady. And every day he tweets grief like a cynical cornball comics, receipts like a red light signaling the end of times. The final night of 2019, and my New Year's Eve plans involve anything that will numb the pain of a world breaking its own heart. My mother and I have already spoken, and her lungs are croaking wet. I just want you to know I don't feel well. And I pause to pull up my stockings beneath my crumpled smile. On this day I sigh. I just wanted to dance and drink and forget about the 61.7% votes. My silk dress falls to my knees with the same swiftness, defiant as the white feminist who said, "I'm your ally," then voted for the demise of our nation's most ignored, underpaid, imprisoned, and impoverished citizens. Every day there is a telephone near. I miss my mother. In the waiting room of the OBGYN, uptown bound on the dirt orange train seat of the subway, oh, how my mother loves the places she can never go. Her bones swaddled with arthritis and smoke, so she relies on my daily bemoans. The Train smells like yesterday, Ma. They raised the tolls and fixed nothing for the people. My landlord refuses to fix my toilet, my bathroom sink, my refrigerator. The city is annoying like an old boyfriend, always buzzing about nothing, and in the way of me making it on time to the polls. This woman didn't say thank you when I held the door, and who does she think she is? Each time I crack and cap on the everydayness of my day, my mother laughs as if she can see the flimsy MTA card, the yellow cabs that refuse to stop for her daughter. In these moments, she can live again. A whole-bodied woman with a full mouth to speak it plain. I ask my mother what hurts. What hurts? How can I help from here? 3,000 miles away, alone in a tower between the sea and the Mexico borders, my mother sighs a little sigh and says, nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice. This is a poem that was co-commissioned by the Academy of American Poets and the New York Philharmonic. It was part of the Project 19 initiative, which was an initiative to bring together a variety of arts in remembrance of the 19th Amendment's 100th anniversary. It was published in 2020. Let's turn to Natalie Diaz. She has a poem called Lake Loop, and this one is somewhat complex, and it has a lot of kind of repetition and things that'll come back again and again in it. And I want to share with you what she says about this poem before reading it, because I think it helps to have just a little bit of the inspiration behind it before diving in. She writes, part of the San Andreas Fault runs along the Mojave Desert. We see and feel the fault. It has always been part of Mojave stories and geography. We have always existed with it in rift, part land. We are land's action, maybe. I'm always wondering and wandering around what it means to be a part of this condition in shift, what it means to embrace discontinuity, to need it, and even to cause it in order to be. Depression, but also moving energy, the necessary fracturing of what is broken, the idea of being made anything or nothing in this country, to be ruined before becoming, the idea that this country tried to give us no space to exist, yet we made that space and make it still. In stress, in friction, glide and flow, slip and heave, we are tectonic and ready. Natives weren't granted citizenship until 1924. The 19th Amendment didn't include them. Once granted citizenship, many states still decided not to let natives exercise their right to vote. They often denied Black American citizens this right as well. Utah refused to let natives vote until 1962. As recently as 2018, North Dakota implemented a voter ID law that kept natives with a P.O. box number and no street address from voting, knowing that many reservations operate with P.O. boxes only. The 19th Amendment was important to many people, but it's important to note who it was intended to advance and to ask if those who were advanced have done enough or will do enough to advance all women today and tomorrow. Oh, this is Natalie Diaz's Lake Loop. And you'll notice the commas at the beginning of some of these lines. It's an interesting device that visually I think it helps us to remember that sometimes we don't always see the beginning. We don't always see the origin of the sentence. We certainly don't always see the origin of the things that affect us in this day and age. So this one actually begins with spaces and a comma. Because there was yet no lake. Into many nights we made the lake a labor. and its necessary laborings to find the basin not yet opened in my body, yet my body, any body, wet or water from the start, to fill a clay start, being what it ever means, a beginning. The earth's first hand on a vision quest, wildering night's skin fields for touch, like a dark horse made of air, turned downward in the dusk, opaquing a hand resembles its ancestors, the war or the horse who made war, what it means to be made, to be ruined before becoming, rift, glacial ablation and breaking, lake hip sloping fluvial then spilled. I unzip the lake, walk into what I am, the thermocline and oxygen, as is with gills, rivers, seas. The water is of our own naming. I am wet, we call it, because it is happening now. Imagined light is light's imagination, a lake shape of it. The obligatory body, its dark burning, reminding us back, memory as filter, desire as lagan, hydrology. The lake is alone, we say in Mojave. Every story happens because someone's mouth, a nature-dependent life, universe. Here at the lake, say, she wanted what she said, to slip down into it, for which a good lake will rise. Lake, which once meant sacrifice, which once meant I am devoted. Here I am, atmosphere, sensation, pressure. The lake is beneath me, pleasure bounded, a slip space between touch and not. Slip of paper, slip of hand, slip body turning toward slip trouble. I am who slipped the moorings. I am so red with lack to loop not, or leave the loop beyond the knot. We won't say love, because it is a difference between vertex and vertices, the number of surfaces we break. Enough, or many, to make the lake loosened from the rock. One body's dearth is another body's ache. Lay it to the earth. All great lakes are meant to take sediment, leg, wrist, the ear, let down and wet with stars, dock lights distant but wanted deep, to be held in the well of the eye, woven like water through itself, in and inside, how to sate a depression if not with darkness, if darkness is not. Fingers brushing a body. Shh, she said. I don't know what the world is. I slip for her or anything like language each new each time. Diffusion, remade and organized, and because nothing is enough, waves, each an emotional museum of water. Left light trembles, a lake figure on loop, a night loop. Every story is a story of water. Before it is gold and alone, before it is black like a rat snake, I begin at the lake, clean once, now drained. I am murk. I am not clean. Everything has already happened. Always the lake is just up ahead in the poem. My mouth is the moon. I bring it down. Lay it over the lake of her thighs, warm lamping axe, hewing water's tender shell, slant slip, entering like light, surrounded into another skin, where there was yet no lake. Yet we made it, make it still to drink and clean ourselves on. All right, we're going to turn next to a shorter poem, one which doesn't have quite as much, well, it doesn't require quite as much work, maybe. But there is something about that last one with I just kind of felt like the waves of the lake coming up again and again, just little fragments, little bits. All of them matter. This one's by Limón, and it's called How to Triumph Like a Girl. I like the lady horses best. How they make it all look easy, like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap. Or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they're ladies. As if this big dangerous animal is also a part of me, that somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart, giant with power, heavy with blood. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge, beating genius machine that thinks, no, it knows it's going to come in first? Anne Sexton, one of the more prolific poets of the 20th century, born in 1928. She didn't live to a ripe old age. She died in 1974, but she had a tremendous gift for verse, some of it rhyming, some of it not, a lot of it free verse, some of it metered, some of it very technical. In this one, there is going to be some rhyming that goes on, and it's not just internal rhymes in the middle of lines, although there's some of that. It's going to be something that develops a kind of rhythm to it over the course of 3 stanzas, each one of them 7 lines long, so 21 stanzas, 21 lines in the whole poem. And it's called Her Kind. I have gone out, a possessed witch, haunting the black air, braver at night, dreaming evil. I have done my hitch over the plain houses, light by light. Lonely thing, 12-fingered, out of mind. A woman like that is not a woman quite. I have been her kind. I have found the warm caves in the woods, filled them with skillets, carvings, shelves, closets, silks, innumerable goods. Fixed the suppers for the worms and the elves, whining, rearranging the disaligned. A woman like that is misunderstood. I have been her kind. I have ridden in your cart, driver, waved my nude arms at villages going by, learning the last bright routes, survivor, where your flames still bite my thigh, and my ribs crack where your wheels wind. A woman like that is not ashamed to die. I have been her kind. You know, there's a lot to be said for the names that we give our children. We often name them just out of a book. We'll pick a name that we like, something that sounds good. We sometimes name them after family members. Sometimes we have something going on in our lives that's particularly important, and we'll name our children after those things or those people. Patricia Smith writes about the name that she received from her mother and the name that her father wished that he could have given her. And each one of them has a different character, but she manages to maintain within herself just a little bit of both. Should have been Jimi, Savannah by Patricia Smith. My mother scraped the name Patricia Ann from the ruins of her discarded delta, thinking it would offer me shield and shelter, that leering men would skulk away at the slap of it. Her hands on the hips of Alabama, she went for flat and functional, then siphoned each syllable of drama, repeatedly crushing it with her broad, practical tongue, until it sounded like an instruction to God, not a name. She wanted a child of pressed head and knocking knees, a trip up in the double Dutch swing, a starched pinafore and peppermint in the sour pickle kind of child, stiff-laced and unshakably fixed on salvation. Her Patricia Ann would never idly throat the Lord's name or wear one of those thin, sparkled shirts that flirted with her knees. She'd be a nurse, or a third-grade teacher, or a postal drone, jobs requiring alarm clock discipline and sensible shoes. My 4 downbeats were music enough for a vapid life of butcher shop sawdust and fatback as cuisine, for raid spritzed into the writhing pockets of a Murphy bed. No crinkled consonance or muted hiss would summon me. My daddy detested borders. One look at my mother's watery belly, and he insisted, as much as he could insist with her, on the name Jimi Savannah, seeking to bless me with the blues-bathed moniker of a ball-breaker, the name of a grown gal in a snug red sheath and unlaced all-stars. He wanted to shoot muscle through whatever I was called, arm each syllable with tiny weaponry, so no one would mistake me for anything other than a tricky whisperer with a switchblade in my shoe. I was bound to be all legs, a bladed debutante hooked on Lucky Strikes and sugar. When I sent up prayers, God's boy would giggle and consider. Daddy didn't want me to be anybody's surefire factory, nobody's callback or seized rhythm. So he conjured a name so odd and hot even a boy could claim it, and yes, he was prepared for the look my mother gave him when he first mouthed his choice, the look that said, "That's it. You done lost your goddamn mind." She did that thing she does, where she grows 2 full inches with righteous. And he decided to just whisper, "Love you, Jimi Savannah," whenever we were alone, re-christening me, the seed of Otis, conjuring his own religion, and naming it me. All right, our next one is going to, this is one where it helps to see it on the page, and I'm going to try to show it to you as best I can. There are parts of it that are kind of right down the middle. There are other parts that are off, to the left, other parts off to the right. It's one that has, you'll hear. It's by Evie Shockley, and it's called Women's Voting Rights at 100, but Who's Counting? And this is another one that was written for Project 19. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a voter by her toe. If she hollers, then you know, got yourself a real Jane Crow. One vote is an opinion with a quiet legal force, a barely audible beep in the local traffic, and just a plashless drop of mercury in the national thermometer. But a collectivity of votes, a flock of votes, a pride of votes, a murder of votes can really make some noise. One vote begets another, if you make a habit of it. My mother started taking me to the polls with her when I was 7. Small, thrilled to step in the booth, pull the drab curtain hush shut behind us, and flip the levers beside each name she pointed to, the X's clicking into view. There, she called the shots. Rich gal, poor gal, hired girl, thief, teacher, journalist, vote your grief. One vote's as good as another. Still in 1913, Illinois' gentle suffragists, hearing Southern women would resent spotting Mrs. Ida B. Wells Barnett amidst white marchers, gently kicked their sister to the curb. But But when the march kicked off, Ida got right into formation as planned. The Tribune's photo showed her present and accounted for. One vote can be hard to keep an eye on, but several, a colony of votes, can't scuttle away unnoticed so easily. My mother, veteran registrar for our majority black election district, once found, after much searching, 2 bags of ballots, a litter of votes, stuffed in a janitorial closet. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippis. 1 vote was all Fannie Lou Hamer wanted. In 1962, when her constitutional right was over 40 years old, she tried to register. All she got for her trouble was literacy tested, poll taxed, fired, evicted, and shot at. A year of grassroots activism nearly planted her Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in the National Convention. 1 vote per eligible voter was all Stacey Abrams needed. She nearly won the Georgia governor's race in 2018, lost by 50,000. An unkindness of votes to the man whose job was maintaining the voter rolls. Days later, she rolled out plans for getting voters a fair fight. It's been 2 years and counting. Of course, now it's been 3 years since then, and we are still counting. There is still work to do. There is work that is to be done by women and by men. We have a long way to go before we achieve the kind of equality where there is actual equity. I know some people think equity is not the goal and shouldn't be the goal. Equality simply means equal opportunity. Well, equity is different. Equity recognizes that not all of us started on the same step when climbing up the ladder. Equity recognizes that not all of us are standing on the same shoulders. We don't all have the inheritance of generations of voting privilege like I do. And so it's going to take people like me working for it too, and I think people like you. And maybe your children, grandchildren, maybe the generations to come will have their work to do as well. But whatever step up we can give them will be a step worth taking. Thanks for joining me for our program of poetry for Women's History Month. We may do this again in a week or two. And I invite you to join me then when we do. Until then, thanks for joining me. I wish you peace.